The fact is, the Republican Party has come a long way from the days of Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan. It really has shifted, and it's been sort of captured, if you will, and the theme of my book is that it's been taken over by a new brand of conservatism. This new type of conservatism is what Fred Barnes, who approves of it, calls big government conservatism. This is a type of conservatism that thinks that you can use big government for conservative ends. It is a truly ends justifies the means form of conservatism. It is a type of government that says that we have big government, we're always going to have big government, so therefore let us see if we can devise a way of making that government achieve the things that we want. Now, Fred Barnes goes on to point out, and he says, as he describes big government conservatives, he says, big government conservatives are favorably disposed towards a conservative welfare state. They are willing to use what would normally be seen as liberal means, activist government, for conservative ends. And they're willing to spend more money and increase the size of government in the process. Now, traditional conservatives, and I'm talking about both sort of Kirkian traditionalist conservatives and libertarian conservatives, have always operated from a sense of humility when it came to what government could accomplish. They would reject what Hayek, and here we are in the F.A. Hayek auditorium, it's appropriate, but they rejected what Hayek called the fatal conceit that government could design society according to some sort of master rational plan. But big government conservatives share with contemporary liberals a belief that government can somehow design a set of policies, a set of incentives and penalties that can make us all behave like Pavlov's dogs. That, you know, if we do X, A, we'll get sugar water, we do B, we'll get an electric shock. And the result is that we'll all end up behaving in the way that policymakers want us to. For both contemporary liberals and big government conservatives, government is neither good nor bad. It's simply one more tool in their arsenal of trying to engineer society. Thus, you find that big government conservatives seek an active role for government on issues such as poverty, health care, and education. I mean, we can think back to the fact that during his speech at the 2004 Republican Convention, George Bush said that government should help people improve their lives. He's gone on and has praised FDR's New Deal and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society and the War on Poverty. And George Bush said, quote, "We've had enough of the stale debate between big government and indifferent government. Government must be active enough to fund services for the poor." And whereas conservatives traditionally have thought that social welfare programs properly belong where they can be most effective with the civil society and the private sector, and I've certainly written a great deal and written 2 books, in fact, on how civil society should help the poor. That's traditionally where conservatives have believed that social activism should be. But big government conservatives are different. They believe that social activism and helping the poor is the proper role of the federal government. Thus, you get Robert Rector from Dan's old alma mater at the Heritage Foundation, who criticizes, quote, "the mythology that the public sector welfare system is bad and corrupt and destructive." He says that there's this that we should not think that there's this nonprofit sector which is good and vital and so on. He goes on to he's written that food stamp program is a far more effective and conservative program than any private sector food bank. This is not the conservatism that I grew up knowing. This is not the conservatism of Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater. At the same time, big government conservatives are concerned about free markets and capitalism. Irving Kristol, after all, gave capitalism only 2 cheers, not 3. Because capitalism and free markets can sometimes lead people to make bad choices. Free markets brings things like rap music that Bill Bennett dislikes so much. free markets brings things that people might not approve of. Thus, David Brooks can write that Americans who can think of nothing but their narrow self-interest in commercial activities lose a sense of grand aspiration and noble purpose. You find that Irving Kristol says government should take a role, should have a degree of responsibility, quote, for helping to shape the preferences of the people, what preferences they exercise in a free market, and should elevate the people. That's the role of government, according to big government conservatives. How different that is from Barry Goldwater, who said that the conservatives' first concern will always be, am I maximizing freedom? That's not a concern for big government conservatives. You know, think of one of my good friends, former Senator Rick Santorum, who did a lot of good here, but if you look at his book, It Takes a Family, he writes that true liberty, he says, is not the freedom to be left alone, but rather the freedom to attend to one's duty to God and family and country. You know, all this sort of, in my mind, brings big government conservatives full circle. They're right back to contemporary liberalism. You know, liberals have long said that individual preferences need to be sacrificed for the greater good of society. Remember, Hillary Clinton once explained her whole political philosophy by saying, quote, it's the time to put the common good, the national interest, ahead of individuals. How different is that from Rick Santorum saying that freedom does not celebrate the individual above society, or David Brooks saying that Americans must serve a cause larger than self-interest? Well, once upon a time, conservatives were appalled when then Vice President Al Gore said that he believed that the government is like grandparents in the sense of that they served a nurturing role. And yet, conservatives sit idly by while President Bush says that he sees government, or sees Americans rather, like a 10-year-old child that needs nurturing from the government. You know, here at the Cato Institute, we've long supported individual liberty. That's why we exist. And during that fight, and during the years that I've worked on issues like health care and welfare and Social Security, I've become accustomed to threats to our individual liberties from the left. But it seems increasingly that threats are now coming from the right as well. Unless the conservative movement goes back to its roots of Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater, are we really destined for nothing except a series of debates between liberals who want to increase the size and cost of government and conservatives who want to increase the size and cost of government? And if that is the case, then who's going to speak for liberty?